I'm MarzGurl.
And I'm JoshKnightTheFirst, and welcome to episode 0 of MokkoriPlay, the only podcast dedicated solely to all things City Hunter. Now, some of you might be saying, why on earth would you want to make a podcast dedicated only to individual episodes and movies revolving around City Hunter? And to that, I respond with, have you looked at other anime or listened to any other anime podcast lately? Lots of other people are doing it with other shows, and nobody's doing it for City Hunter, so we have the market totally cornered.
So, I think before we start kind of tackling City Hunter episode by episode, we need to take the time with this particular podcast episode to introduce you to exactly what City Hunter is, or reintroduce you if you're already familiar with the franchise. And I think as far as an American audience is concerned, many of you might hear the name City Hunter and think, wait, isn't that Jackie Chan movie where he had that fight dedicated to Street Fighter 2, and he dressed up like Chun-Li and did the spinning bird kick? And honestly, yeah, you're not exactly wrong, because for as weird as that movie is actually based on a pre-existing manga and anime franchise out of Japan, also known as City Hunter.
Which is the thing we're here to talk about.
There's a lot of City Hunter. City Hunter just doesn't ever seem to stop. So despite the fact that we're telling you there's a manga, there's an anime, it just goes on and on from there. Movies, live action movies.
Live action series.
These series that are just from all over the world. Taiwan
Didn't
and
you say
Korea.
there's an isekai?
There's an isekai manga by some other artist. I think it's got the blessing from the manga artist. So the manga artist, Tsukasa Hojo.
Yes.
He originally created City Hunter in 1985. The original run was in Shonen Jump. It went from 1985 to 1991. This wasn't the first thing that he was known for. Prior to this, he'd written the manga Cat's Eye, about a team of 3 girls who are cat burglars, and the cops are always trying to stop them. It's cute. It's kind of cool. It's very early 80s. It's got an anime as well. It's got
They're jazzercise spies.
Yeah, they're kind of jazzercise looking spies.
Well, criminal spy kind of.
Wearing jazzercise cat suit kind of stuff. But Cat's Eye, you will find, comes up referenced a lot in City Hunter as well. So bringing that up is a little relevant, not just because Tsukasa Hojo wrote the thing, but because they pop up from time to time in City Hunter on top of that.
So that was 85. The major thing to happen was the anime adaptation in 1987 that was introduced to the world via Sunrise, who a lot of people know for the Gundam franchise.
And boy, do they remind you all the time. They remind you who they are in the show, because the Sunrise logo is just on...
It's everywhere.
It's on everything. They really thought they were really clever and funny. And then on top of that, they're just constantly making the new type noise throughout the anime.
I think it's just a thing that you see with a lot of anime studios, where they end up reusing a lot of sound effects. You see this a lot with Toei-produced properties and live-action tokusatsu properties, where you'll hear a lot of recycled sound effects. Like, you hear certain noises and like, no, that's the sound of a Gundam punching through a wall, or that's a Gundam's Dober cannon going off. I know that noise. I've watched my share of Gundam.
Yeah, exactly.
So that went on for a while. There was City Hunter 2, City Hunter 3, then there were several movies.
City Hunter 91.
City Hunter 91.
So there were 4 kind of seasons of City Hunter that ran from 1987 also to 1991. Like you said, there's several animated movies. In North America, we got this anime through ADV at the time. ADV now technically no longer exists. They've been split up into several different anime studios, including Sentai Filmworks, but they actually do not own City Hunter. Instead, City Hunter is now owned by Discotek Media. So Discotek Media has been slowly publishing City Hunter on Blu-ray, but they're also streaming the entire franchise, the entire TV series, the animated movies, on several platforms, including Crunchyroll, Verve by proxy because it's connected to Crunchyroll.
Retro Crush.
And Retro Crush. The manga has been a lot less lucky.
That's really unfortunate because of all of these things for as long as this series has run, and for a lot of manga that we do get over here and maybe take for granted, that one we didn't get.
We got it, but it went the way of a ton of other comics that were published by Gutsoon under Raijin Comics. So this was a manga publication that came out before Shonen Jump started being published in North America as well. City Hunter was being published there for a while, along with like Fist of the North Star.
I was just about to say they had Fist of the North Star.
They had Fist of the North Star, and for the longest time, those were the only places you could read comics like those. Only recently has Fist of the North Star been picked up again by Viz. It's getting republished in this really great hardback format.
Yeah, with that good paper.
Yeah, super good paper with really great color prints inside. City Hunter has not been as lucky. Now, it has been recently, in fact, I think within the last few months to the last year, in other regions, been republished. In, I believe, Spain, Spanish, and somewhere in Southeast Asia, they've gotten, it's either Indonesian or I'm not really sure which country has just recently started getting City Hunter republished, as well as the Isekai manga. They started getting that published in other languages as well. It's not happening with City Hunter.
Which is the weird thing, because you bring up these other countries, and that's the thing that kind of blew my mind getting into City Hunter, is that this show, this franchise, is actually hella popular in other countries.
Especially in Europe. Real big
in France.
In Europe. France, real hard. And if you need any further proof how big it is in France, just 2 years ago in 2019, France had a really fantastic live-action adaptation of City Hunter produced by Sony, right?
Yes.
It was a Sony-produced film. Real high budget. Really Hollywood budget-looking movie.
They did the kind of thing over there that we would do with some older anime, where over there they didn't call it City Hunter. They know that it's from City Hunter, the manga, but over there they renamed it Nicky Larson.
Yeah, they gave it all the characters super French names. Really French names. But it's weird how, despite the fact that they're using, Ryo's name is now Nikki, and Kaori's name is now Laura, or whatever.
Yeah, simple things like that.
Everything else about it is just ridiculously City Hunter. It's insane how accurate it is.
It's incredibly faithful. It's in one of my top 10 lists of most faithful anime adaptations from page or anime to film to live action. And the thing of it is, there's so many things, we live in a world where we've got Bleach live action, Full Metal Alchemist live action, Rurouni Kenshin just had the final movie come out on Netflix. This one still tops most of them for me because of how just insanely faithful it is to the source material, while even managing to get around some things that we'll end up talking about here on the show. So going into that, we should probably talk about, well, what is City Hunter? Who is Nicky Larson in reference to, okay, that's the French name. Who's the guy we're here to talk about? Because we've got to introduce you guys.
So we want to introduce you to Ryo, which actually, I want to address this before we go on. ADV, when they were publishing the original run of the anime, they didn't dub the TV series, but they did dub all of the movies that had come out up until a certain point when they no longer had the license anymore.
Right.
And the dubs are not good, but not only that, but Ryo got renamed to Joe? I don't know why that was such a big, important thing to them, that they really needed to give him a more anglicized name.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and get into that. So this show, this franchise, City Hunter, revolves around a character named Ryo Saiba. Now, Ryo is, in his own mind, kind of a ladies' man, but in actuality, he's a pervert. But he's very, very good at what his job is, and he's referred to as what's known as a sweeper. So you kind of think of him as a gun for hire, not quite a detective. He will do a lot of things for money, like protection,
I don't think sweeper is really terminology that we tend to use
in
English vernacular. So
he's definitely somebody who works kind of off the grid, under the table. The cops are kind of aware of him, but not really.
At least one cop that is aware
There's
of him.
who we'll get to.
We'll definitely get to her later. She shows up a lot and gives a lot of trouble.
Yes.
Just a lot of trouble. So as a sweeper, like, sometimes maybe he's asked to murder somebody, usually not, but, sometimes it comes up. He's just a fantastic shot. Like a ludicrously fantastic...
He's an amazing, insanely accurate marksman. His weapon of choice is a Colt Python 357 Magnum, 4-inch specifically.
It's a relatively small, light gun, right?
Well, no, it's actually pretty heavy.
Is it heavy?
Yeah, all things considered. This thing's basically a hand cannon, but it's known for people who like accuracy. It's got a smooth trigger pull, which you see a lot of that. That's his weapon of choice. Very rarely will he ever use a different weapon, if at all.
So there's this weird juxtaposition between these two aspects of his personality. One is so goofy, so over the top, constantly, frankly not just hitting on women, but if I'm to be honest, straight up assaulting women.
The man is horny personified.
It's bad. It's real bad. And so you don't think, this guy is really freaking good at what he does, and then just suddenly his attitude 180s and he goes straight into business mode and he's just shooting the crap out of everything, and everybody's like, oh my god, how did you do this incredibly amazing trick thing, this crazy shot, oh Jesus.
Like, you were able to get trajectory done. How did you make the bullet slow down? How did you do this, that, and the other thing with the gun? And he's quick with it. He's amazing with it. But like you just mentioned, he's got that other aspect to him, which kind of brings us to having to explain what the title of this podcast is, MokkoriPlay, which is our play on words of a term that comes up a lot in the show, which is mokkori. Kayla, why don't you go ahead and explain as best as we can what mokkori is?
Well, let's take a step back and explain how the word mokkori even shows up in the anime, right?
Okay.
So in the manga, dude is such a horn dog perv man that Hojo has drawn him constantly with boners. All the time, he's pitching a tent constantly.
Yes.
You see this big old
he's got wood.
Mountain in his pants all the friggin' time. So the producers of the anime were like, God, this manga is so funny, we can't draw boners on TV,
We
though.
can't do it. We can't have it. We need you to figure some other way around it. Go to work, Sunrise.
So what they did was they just made up a word. But basically, in Japanese, the word mokkori it's an onomatopoeia. It's not really a real word. It's a sound effect. It is the sound effect of getting a boner. So if your boner, if you could hear it.
If you can hear boners is what we're saying to you right now.
It's like the equivalent of bioyoyoyoing, or maybe if you're familiar with
Wayne's World.
Wayne's World, maybe more like swing.
And we actually had this conversation the other day trying to figure out, well, how do we explain the concept of mokkori? Honestly, swing is probably the closest thing to it.
ADV did those dubs of those movies.
Oh God, right. We can't not talk about this.
So they decided we need to translate the word mokkori, which I don't disagree with. The problem is,
for the time, I get why they did it.
Slang ages, and so to that extent, like, I understand why kids on the internet these days are like, oh, why are you putting slang in the subtitles of anime? Well, the character was saying slang, so I understand why you choose slang. The slang they chose was nookie.
Well, it's not just nookie, it's the delivery of the actor playing Joe Saiba. He says it like, nookie.
He's just screeching.
He sounds like an old man. Like, hey, you want to come over for some nookie?
It's horrible.
Like Conan O'Brien doing some awful voice that he does on purpose. But that's the way it comes across, and it doesn't quite work.
No, it really...
the way they thought it did. And maybe it worked a little better when those releases came out of ADV, but now listening to it in the year of our Lord 2021... it doesn't fly.
Oh, I can't stand it. I can't imagine I would have been able to stand it at the time solely based on the delivery. But then again, maybe that's what it's supposed to feel like, because Ryo's just such a ludicrously strange person.
Now, as we're describing Ryo, another kind of idea to get into your head if you're not familiar with the characters, basically he's kind of like, in a certain way, he's like a Japanese Austin Powers. He's got a very intriguing duality to him.
I want to make perfect perfectly clear, though. This man, if he existed in real life, I would hate him.
He would be arrested.
He would be arrested. He would be a sex offender.
Yes.
We do need to talk about how to kind of come to terms with, well, this is fiction. Can we have a problematic fave? I think if you accept this isn't reality, I know the difference between reality and fiction.
It's the interesting thing about it, because I think and I know we're going to probably catch some flack for this, but I think it's worth noting here, is that the show, after a certain amount of time, once we get past the intro episodes of maybe the first 5 to 8 episodes, there's a very definite foil that is put in place, a very definite parameter that is set for Ryo, that when he does these things that do not have him asking for permission, asking for consent for the things that he does, which he should, and he doesn't, there's a very clear narrative there that what he's doing is not okay. And a lot of that comes in the form of the second most important character in the show next to Ryo, which is Kaori.
And Kaori gives punishment.
Yes.
All the time.
So
very violent punishment.
So let's go ahead and intro Kaori here. So we're talking about our female lead for the show. That's Kaori Makimura. She has a brother who was Ryo's partner for a time. And this isn't going to be very spoiler heavy. I mean, the show's been out for a while, but we kind of have to address how she gets intro.
Yeah, we unfortunately have to spoil a thing that happens about 5 episodes in. You only see Kaori's brother for about 5 episodes.
We get this concept that he and Ryo have been partners for a while doing the sweeper business.
But unfortunately, brother Makimura, ends up going out on some mission by himself, and he gets himself killed. And Ryo has to make promises to him that he's gonna take care of his sister Kaori. And Kaori's real sad and broken up about the death of her brother, but she says, well, this is what my brother was doing, Ryo. I'm gonna join you now. Now you and I are both City Hunter.
We are partners
We are
now.
partners.
And the bulk of the series, the core of the series, is the relationship between Ryo and Kaori, because there's a lot of very interesting layers here that we ended up finding as we went through the series. And let's get that out of the way up front. We've sat through all of it.
We sat through the entire TV series and all of the animated films and the French film and the Jackie Hunter. Although I like that.
I like that. We'll
the Jackie Chan film as well. There's a ton of extra stuff we have not sat through yet.
And we're still getting to that.
But up until that point, we've watched a lot of it, so we've got this better understanding of what their characters work through together and uncover about each other.
Yeah, they have a very interesting dynamic, which at base level you look at it and it's like, oh, this is Looney Tunes. This is, Roadrunner Coyote things, trying to hit people with hammers that you pulled out of end space. And, there's panty flashes and guns going off, and it's cartoony.
It is really the very definition of what people pictured anime was, especially for its time period.
They're in the late 80s.
It's really interesting because for the most part, about 95% of the time, the show is not about supernatural-like things, but Kaori, what is it about Kaori? She's got the traditional late 80s anime girl with a hammer that she pulls out of her back pocket to just punish Ryo with. Oh, were you looking at this girl? Were you grabbing this girl? Were you doing something you shouldn't have done?
Were you trying to peep in on the bath?
And she just pulls out hundreds, thousands of tons of hammers out of absolutely nothing. And they allude to it like it's real. Like it's a real thing that really exists, that she possesses some end space in her pocket where she keeps hammers, because they do the magic trick of what's that behind your ear? And they pull out a whole ass hammer, and then they pull out several hammers. They joke to it like she's got a locker full of hammers.
I think we saw the locker full of hammers in one episode. But the whole point of it is that anytime Ryo does that, she is there to shut it down.
Right, so we know that Ryo is doing really bad, terrible sex crime things, but also he doesn't technically get away with it because Kaori comes in and Looney Tunes the hell out of his head with a hammer. Or several other variations of punishment that he goes through.
But the interesting thing about it is that as cartoony as that looks, over the course of the series, you end up learning there are other layers to that, which we don't want to get into right now, but it'll be very interesting when we start seeing that get peeled away and seeing, okay, well, why does this keep happening?
Mm-hmm. Because it's weird that there's actually a reason, but there is.
There is.
There's a reason.
There's actually more than one slightly.
Yeah.
But they mesh well together. And so there becomes this kind of thing. There was this series in the 80s, Moonlighting, where you had Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis. You know, they were kind of detectives in this love-hate relationship with each other. I feel a lot of that energy here, where they're basically, for the most part, they're private eyes. They're not technically, but they get mistaken for it a lot. And there's this underlying idea of romance between them, of, well, how could you fall for a guy with such awful mannerisms and awful manner, and he's always insulting you.
And Rio, you were told, don't go hitting on my sister, and now you find yourself, like, trying to lie to yourself that maybe you don't have feelings for her, so, and this develops quite a bit.
It's very, very slow burn.
It's super slow. In fact, you really kind of don't see that development in the first season hardly at all.
Second season, though.
Second season, it comes in little waves across that whole second season. Second season, hands down, best season of the franchise.
No argument.
No, I can't. There's no arguing with it. You get to season 3 and you're like, why is the animation different? And then you get to season 4 and then it just ends. Season 4 being City Hunter 91. It just ends and you're just like, that's how it ended, huh?
That was it?
That's how it ended. And I need to point out there, it's gonna end with a reoccurring theme that keeps popping up, which is ladies and princesses from other fictional countries just keep showing up in Shinjuku for some reason.
Which is where the show takes place. So the show does take place in realistic Shinjuku, which is a district there in Tokyo.
And so that's the city that is being city huntered in the series City Hunter.
One of the things that drew us to it is that if you keep up with anything we do online, one of the things we love is playing through the series Ryuga Gotoku, which is brought over here as the Yakuza series. And the setting of Yakuza is the same as the setting of City Hunter.
That is, if you have played any of the Yakuza games or Judgment, Judge Eyes, or we're about to come upon the release of Lost Judgment, the sequel to Judgment, they primarily take place in the fictional world is Kamurocho, but it's based on the real district of Kabukicho, which is inside Shinjuku. I think you get the best visualization of that. There's a real good visualization of it in the first episode of City Hunter.
Yes.
And then there's a real good visualization of it in the 2019 animated movie.
Which was Shinjuku Private Eyes.
Shinjuku Private Eyes, especially right at the beginning. You see them doing this amazing car chase through Kabukicho. You see them drive up in front of the Toho cinemas.
Where they have the giant Godzilla head.
There's a giant Godzilla head, and they basically save the giant Godzilla head from, like, an RPG missile.
Yes.
It's really incredible. It's an incredible chase scene, which they do in their adorable Mini Cooper, bright red Mini Cooper that, for some reason, Ryo is just
super attached to that car.
He is incredibly attached to his Mini Cooper. It comes up
it's his Batmobile.
It comes up a few times that, like, don't you want to drive some different car? Like we can get you a better car. And he's like, no, I really like this one. And it's just, you don't think of a guy who's like some kind of a spy or a hitman or something of that nature driving around in a Mini Cooper. But this guy is the guy doing it, and he really likes it. And that thing gets destroyed
quite a bit,
several times, repeatedly.
But he always buys another one.
We don't see him buy another one, but you have to think that he must, because sometimes the model changes.
Yeah.
Like the headlamps, the fog lamps are different sometimes, and you could chalk that up to, well, the animators just chose a different picture to reference that day. But also, think about how many times that car has been exploded. He can't just fix it. He had to have bought another one because he was like, oh, I really liked that car. I'm gonna get another one.
Now that I'm thinking about it, one way of likening this to anything you might have seen, any other media, if you're familiar with the USA series Burn Notice, this is basically Burn Notice, but more pervy, and an anime.
Oh, I'll take your word for it. I don't know what you're talking about.
So yeah, this is his Mach 5. The red Mini Cooper, that's his car. You see that coming, you know, City Hunter's out on the prowl.
I thought it was pretty impressive, actually. I think only the first few minutes of the Jackie Chan City Hunter movie are really especially accurate to City Hunter, the manga or the anime. But the red Mini Cooper shows up. It shows up for a few seconds in that movie. Red Mini Cooper shows up in the French movie as well.
Yes.
So,
and again, that movie is insanely accurate for all things considered, which is really interesting because Japan did this thing, which they do with some other things. They did it with Power Rangers, specifically the Power Rangers original series, Mighty Morphin, and the movie, where they took our adaptation of it, because Power Rangers is just Super Sentai footage spliced together with American footage to make a new product, and then they release that product, and then Japan takes it, dubs it back into Japanese, the newly combined product, and then they release that. What happened with the French City Hunter movie was it was released in France at the same time. I think it was like a week's difference between it and Shinjuku Private Eyes.
It was a really short span of time between those two movies, yeah.
And the French movie got dubbed back into Japanese.
Incredible.
But they've replaced all the character names going by their French names back into referring to them as Kaori, Ryo, all these other characters that show up in the movie, and with slightly different editing, which I argue makes it just that much funnier.
There's, unfortunately, for anybody who complains, Japan would never censor their own stuff, you guys don't know what you're talking about, because there's stuff that comes up in the French film, the French City Hunter Nicky Larson film,
yes,
that most definitely requires some censorship, at the very least if you're going to air it on television.
Yes.
The things they choose to do visually almost make it way funnier. The censorship is so much funnier.
But it's totally on brand.
It's very City Hunter on brand. We will definitely talk about that eventually in the course of doing this podcast.
So, to talk about how the episodes normally work, the episodes can be a little formulaic, but you get used to it like so many other shows that you watch. So what generally happens in a given City Hunter episode is we have our opening, and what happens is they're at Shinjuku Station. There's a chalkboard where people can post things, little messages to people, and if you're trying to hire City Hunter for a job, your required task is to write the alphabetical letters X, Y, Z.
It's a code, it's a code phrase to let City Hunter know, oh, somebody wants to hire me.
Which normally will have Kaori checking the board to see if there's any messages there. They'll go ahead and pick up the case. Usually it's a woman.
If it's not a woman, then Ryo complains a lot about it.
Because he says he has a policy of never taking jobs from men.
He doesn't want to take jobs from men. He doesn't want to take jobs from kids. Doesn't want to take jobs from women who don't identify as cis women sometimes. It's a little bit of a problem. Thankfully, that doesn't come up very often.
But usually it ends up with them taking the case. Hijinks ensue. Somebody gets groped. Ryo gets hit with a hammer several times. He shows off some of his amazing gun skills. And at least for the first season or two, the episodes end on a freeze frame as they're zooming in or zooming out. A lot of endings at the airport.
A lot of endings at the airport. Somebody takes off on Sunrise Airlines.
Yes, specifically, Sunrise was like, oh, we not only are we animating this show, we have our own airline in this universe.
And this is what I'm talking about when I say there's like a princess from some other fictional country coming into Shinjuku like every other week. And then every other week, Ryo has to fight the Yakuza. It's
it
one
happens
or the
a lot.
other.
Or the other third thing that happens a lot is that somebody from Ryo's past wants to settle a score and duel him. That happens a lot.
A lot of people want to murder him. A lot of people want him dead.
Because from his past, we find gradually over the course of the series that he lived his life as a mercenary in other parts of the world, and as such, he's made a lot of enemies, one of which that we end up getting introduced to, who goes by the codename Falcon, who ends up becoming a friend, ally, sort of, over the course of the series that Ryo nicknames Umibozu.
Which is a joke name. That neither one of those names are his real name.
Yes, but he's this big, giant, hulking guy, bald head, sunglasses, mustache. He's always in army fatigues. Usually uses a rocket launcher. Has his own Jeep.
And he's terrified of cats.
He has a cat phobia.
He has a cat phobia.
Which Ryo exploits all the time.
But he tries to be as nice and polite as he can around the ladies. And
yes.
If he's trying to communicate on a kind level with ladies, he gets very, very nervous.
He gets easily flustered.
He's very easily flustered, which is kind of cute for such an enormous man.
Yes. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Ryo, as City Hunter, is kind of not on the cops' radar, but they know there's somebody out there. There is at least one person on the Metropolitan Police Force who does know of City Hunter's whereabouts, knows him personally, and that's Sayako, who is a policeman that, generally speaking, has Ryo do a lot of dirty work for her. Usually, in order to get Ryo to do work for her, she will allude to doing favors for him, which she never makes good on.
He's got this big old checklist running of all these promises of, you know the word mokkori now. You promised all this mokkori, and he unfurls this, laundry list.
Like the CVS receipt of mokkori receipts.
I have all these IOUs, and I am going to cash them in. And she's just like, oh, well, you're gonna do me this favor, so I don't owe you at least this one, and this one. As she never makes good on it, and for a while you're like, well, Ryo kind of deserves it. Okay, he's a perv, he's a dick, if she plays him, who cares? But after a while, you're kind of like, no, she really is just using him. It's kind of bad.
Depending on how you look at it, you can take it one of two ways on that. Either of who's using who, really. Mm-hmm. Which is an interesting enough dynamic. And she, of course, also has no problem punishing Ryo when he goes over the line. She's also very good with knives. She keeps several very sharp knives on her person for use against the villain of the week, or against Ryo if he tries to get too close.
Unfortunately, after a certain amount of time passes, she kind of becomes useless, and later on, she just tells Ryo to go and do her dirty work for her, and then she just shows up at the last minute to be like, yep, job's done, I'm coming in for the arrest, thanks for the assist, bro, I'm taking the credit.
To take a page from a friend of ours, my save.
My save, yeah.
That's very much her role.
Or sometimes you don't even get throughout the episode that she had set anything up, or that she knew about any of this criminal underworld stuff happening. Ryo's got the whole thing worked out, and then Sayako comes rolling up like, woo! Alright, thanks. We had our eye on this guy for weeks. We're just gonna be taking him now.
Okay, so does that mean we're gonna cash in those IOUs now since I helped you out? Well, no,
Bye.
because you created all this property damage, so we're not gonna charge you for it, and that's gonna take up at least 20 IOUs. Bye. That's how that goes. Mm-hmm. And so, in general, that's how an episode of City Hunter breaks down, with all of those different variations throughout. We get to learn more about all of these characters, get to learn about their families, their backstories, what makes them tick, watching these very funny little interplays here, there, and otherwise. A lot of the characters that we end up meeting episode to episode are very one note. Some of them, you get a surprising amount of depth out of them, especially for the ones that have 2 and 3 parters, mm-hmm. which is really surprising when the show does that, because it gives you this feeling of, oh wow, I didn't know you could get that deep on me, wow.
Yeah.
But generally, the show is very lighthearted, it's comedic, it's definitely a product of the 80s when it comes to action.
Oh, especially some of those animated movies. One of them in particular just went so hard on the action. You can see that they clearly watched an American action movie.
Or several American action movies.
Specifically Schwarzenegger films.
Yeah, there's several episodes, and specifically focal episodes with, Umibozu, where they clearly had just finished watching Commando for, the 10th time. They're like, we're gonna make Umibozu do the Commando thing.
So several things that I think are just fun to watch out for, just kind of in the background or something. Always catching the Sunrise logo, because you never know where you're going to find it. You'll catch references, just pop culture references all over the place. There'll be movie posters or references to PC games of the time, or horror movies for a while was a big thing they liked to reference in the first season. Suddenly, when you get to the second season, they must have had some partnership with M&M's, because there's just M&M's everywhere.
There's M&M's advertising plastered everywhere. Cowdy comes home with groceries, and you can clearly see the bag of M&M's.
You're just like, Cowdy, how many times can you go buy M&M's? Peanut M&M's? They're always peanut M&M's.
It's always peanut M&M's.
It's always peanut M&M's. They don't say peanut, but they're on that yellow background
and
logo.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, the yellow background logo is peanut M&M's. Okay, you look out for those. You look out for the pop culture references.
You look for all the English signs.
English, that was the one I was thinking of. Oh, there's so much English. Oh, it's incredible. It's so
delicious.
Funny. I love how much English there is. Really, I don't know what made them decide. We just want to put all these foreign words all over everything. Do they make sense? We don't know. Who cares? Just put it on everything.
Yes.
And
then there's the little ticks that happen. Like there's a bird that likes to fly through the background, or a little dragonfly that flies through when somebody's made a joke. But it's a really bad joke. So there's the situation where that comes up. It's just such an anime thing. The birds, they're not even really real. So they're crows, right? They're just cutesy, cartoony little crows. So if somebody says something really wacky or really insane, the other person in the room is just like, oh my god, I can't believe this guy. And in the background, you see this cute, funny crow flapping its wings behind somebody's face. Or a dragonfly. I don't really know what the significance of choosing either a crow or a dragonfly is at that moment. The crow, as I understand it, the way a crow is depicted as laughing in Japanese media, or even in some other medias, that it sounds like it's laughing.
Yeah, that part makes sense.
Yeah.
I get that. The dragonfly, I don't totally get. All I know is they leave a trail behind them that kind of just looks like the longest ellipses.
Yes.
You know? So you can kind of at least get this picture of, like, oh, the other person in the room thought this thing that this other character said was so stupid, you just have no words.
Yeah, like a dad joke or something going
flat.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I definitely want to mention that drew us to this series was, with all this action, you need a good soundtrack. The music, the opening and ending theme, some of it is incredibly iconic, specifically the ending theme to the first season, which was TM Network's Get Wild.
God, Get Wild, iconic. In fact, apparently this past year, Get Wild had something of a resurgence. It became meme-worthy in Japan specifically. For whatever reason, people would film themselves getting in their car, either getting off of work or getting out of school, and they would drive away and drive to go home, and they would let Get Wild play in the background. Like, that was just a thing everybody was doing for some reason. That lady that we've seen recently who just goes to random places and plays the piano, and she starts playing
this
Get
Japanese
Wild.
YouTuber.
Yeah, she just starts playing Get Wild on the piano in random public places.
And she gets crowds. And people are there like, oh man, you can see
crying. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing.
People love that song.
So Get Wild is obviously the most iconic song probably out of the entire franchise, but there's other really, really great moments. I think the first opening is so 80s. It's one of the best.
Yes.
There's Footsteps, which is like an image song.
An insert song. Usually happens during action scenes.
But it only happens throughout, I don't know, maybe the second season. And it's so iconic, and then they drop it. I think they made a lot of mistakes once they got to City Hunter 3.
Yeah.
A lot of mistakes, like no longer using Footsteps.
It made so much of an impact that it shows up in the French live-action movie.
It does. I think it's the first ending. of City Hunter 2. What is the name of the artist who he's
Yasuyuki Okamura,
who also did the opening to Space Dandy. As soon as I heard his voice, I was like, "You're the Space Dandy guy."
Yes,
I know you.
And it's a very upbeat, very catchy, very 80s song. But damn if that thing doesn't get stuck in your head.
Oh, it slaps. It slaps.
It absolutely slaps.
I didn't know prior to the pandemic a whole lot about City Hunter, really, aside from, I mean, who hasn't heard City Hunter and then equates it to, oh, the Jackie Chan movie? But aside from that, I had always seen images of this really Miami Vice looking anime, you know? And so visually speaking, I was always super interested in City Hunter just because it looked so cool. That's the aesthetic that I'm like, oh, I need this.
Yeah, if you listen to a lot of Vaporwave and things like that, this is the image that goes along with
City
that.
Hunter is super Vaporwave friendly.
Yes.
It's very Vaporwave friendly. And so it was, I have to admit, sitting through maybe the first 5-ish episodes at the very least was kind of a slog. The first few episodes are relatively slowly paced. Ryo really thinks of himself as way more of a badass than he really should. Like, he's almost insufferable at the beginning. You really have to decide you're gonna push through those first few episodes before you realize, hey, there's a pretty decent show that comes after this.
Yeah, but thankfully, really what it is when Kaori shows up, which is there in, I believe it's episode 5. And then once you get her in the mix, then the show finds its footing. Once, unfortunately, like we said before, once Makimura passes away, the show becomes what it is, and then from there you're off to the races.
There it finally finds its pacing. The pacing at the very beginning is really not so good. It's really not super fun. It gets fun.
Yes.
It finally gets fun after a little bit of time. So you just have to trust that the first few episodes aren't necessarily the flavor of the rest of the series.
But so at the very least, trust us. Because we're going to get through it.
I hope you would. I would hate to tell you, just skip like the first 4 episodes, because then you don't meet Kaori's brother, who is extremely important and instrumental in why Kaori and Ryo bond with each other. His death is like the most important thing
in the entire show
that makes them happen. So even though he's only there for such a short amount of time,
the weight of his loss is felt throughout the entire series.
You'll get flashbacks to him relatively frequently. They talk about him all the time.
Constantly.
The fact that, I don't want to give too much away, but the fact that he dies on Kaori's birthday, like, it's super impactful. So anytime her birthday comes back up again,
or it's about to come back up. Not necessarily even in that same episode. They're both thinking about it. They're both dwelling on it.
Yeah, this was the most important person in both these people's lives, in some different capacity from each other, but still, all the same, that's how they end up even being in the same place together in the first place. So, if not for the fact that Kaori's brother is in those first 5 episodes, I would almost say, just skip those first 5 or whatever. But I can't say that. I unfortunately have to tell you, you have to suffer through those first few.
You're gonna carry that weight, and you need to feel the weight. And he needs those 5 episodes to build the rest of the series on, so that we can see what it means that he's not there.
Right.
So beyond that, we plan to cover each episode. As we're going through this, we're gonna cover all those movies. We're gonna cover Shinjuku Private Eyes. We're gonna cover the French movie. We'll cover the Jackie Chan movie individually.
We'll see what happens after that, because there is so much City Hunter material.
And an official spin-off.
There's 2 official spin-offs, really. There's the Isekai, it's technically official. Then there's a manga about Umibozu working at a cafe.
Yes.
Which is a thing that comes up at a certain point in the manga and the anime, and it's just like his cute, adorable little side stories.
Yes.
So,
but also, kind of in other parts of the world, equally as big, is this offshoot alt-universe story called Angel Heart.
Also written and drawn by Hojo, the original author of the original manga for City Hunter, which you would think, if Hojo had not told you this is an alternate universe, it sure does feel like you could just say, oh, well, this picks up from the end of City Hunter. And we've already built up on this podcast, oh, well, Kaori and Ryo's relationship is really super important.
It's the core of the show.
It's the core of the show. And Angel Heart takes that a step further and says, oh, they were so close to each other, they were finally, about to get married. Oh, never mind, Kaori's dead. What? Why is Kaori dead? Oh, and we put her heart in the body of this other assassin, and now this other assassin lady is starting to, feel Kaori's memories and is starting to get attracted to Ryo. What? Why is this
just wild stuff.
Yeah, really, really wild stuff. It almost feels like it's a sequel to City Hunter, but Hojo's like, no. I promise it's an alternate universe from this point on. So there's a manga of that, there's an anime of that, there's a live action series of that.
There's several in different languages.
There are? Jesus Christ. Oh no.
Yeah, so that can go off in its own direction depending on how you end up viewing the characters at the end of the run. Do you want them to go in the direction of Angel Heart where, oh, things got really tragic? Or do you want them to go in the direction of Shinjuku Private Eyes where even in modern times they're still out there as City Hunter operating and Ryo's still running away from hammers? It's up to you. So really what we would say is if you want to listen, if you want to get into the series, if you like comedy, if you like some old school anime hijinks and action.
If you like the 80s.
If you love the 80s.
If you are down for anime, Japanese vaporwave kind of stuff, very much get on the City Hunter train. I think finally in North America, we're starting to feel the build-up that the momentum that it's really deserved, especially thanks to Discotech, who've been much better about pushing its presence, and I can only hope that one day the manga receives English publication again, because, you can go out there and look for scanlations, but my god, these scanlations are some of the worst things I've ever read. As a native English speaker, even though they're trying to tell me this scanlation is in English, I can't understand it. I can't understand
it's awful.
I would just steal this manga, except it's so bad, it's literally unstealable.
Yes.
I can't even read it.
You'd be the worse off for trying to.
So another thing you could do is try and go hunt down these super old publications of English City Hunter, but
good luck with that.
1, they're hard to find. 2, when you do find them, they're super expensive. And 3, you'll never finish it because they never finished publishing it. So you're screwed either way.
It's really upsetting.
It's bad. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, so the thing is, if you want to watch along with us, we're going to go episode by episode. Don't forget, you can watch City Hunter streaming now on Verve, Crunchyroll, or Retro Crush. You can any of those platforms, you can check out these episodes.
Especially Retro Crush, you could do that for free.
Yes, that's always a great option.
Well, we hope we've given you enough information in the City Hunter franchise to kind of get you interested. So now that we've introduced you to Ryo, Kaori, and a whole slew of other fun characters, we hope you'll watch the anime along with us as we go back over it episode by episode and walk through what made each of those episodes so great. Come back next time when we cover the first episode of the TV series, One Cool Sweeper, XYZ is a Dangerous Cocktail.
And if you want to catch up with us outside this podcast, you can always find us both over on Twitter. I'm at JoshKnightTheFirst.
And I'm at MarzGurl. Thank you all so much for listening to our intro episode of MokkoriPlay. And if you don't come back next episode, I'm gonna shoot Josh through the hand.
Wait, what?